Folks, let's go back to our panel. So we were talking about this cheating scandal in Atlanta, and I mean, it certainly roiled the system there. The superintendent, Beverly Hall, she always maintained that she had no involvement in it, wasn't aware of it. She died of breast cancer before. She said actually she was too sick to go to trial, and she recently died of breast cancer. So what do you make of this? I mean, does this, is this a chilling effect, or does it send a signal to teachers and administrators that, look, folks are serious about the education of kids and about rigging, cheating? Because I mean, I know that there was a cheating scandal that took place in Houston as well.
So I guess, you know, going back to what Dr. Malveaux said about the whole teaching to the test, I think that has also caused, I guess the No Child Left Behind has caused this whole atmosphere of we've got to do better on tests and not necessarily concerned about the learning and the ability there and the whole concept around that, especially in the public school system. But with this case in itself, when I saw that it was a RICO charge, that was astounding. And yes, it should put some fear in some people's hearts and minds about how are they going to go about helping our young people achieve those tests. But you know, I'm kind of with the people that say, you know, I do have sympathy, meaning I don't think they need to go to jail. I think they should be able to pay a fine and have the opportunity, all opportunities that afford you under due process. But, you know, we have to make a determination as a nation and for our educational system, what is it that we want? There were parents who were really upset to find out my child is not doing as well as they said based on the test. So what are the measures that are out there for us to understand that?
Look, Cleo, I get the concern about the focus on testing in this country. I mean, I get that. But if I'm involved in whether or not there's a focus on that, rigging a test, changing scores, boils down to right and wrong. Whether or not you think there are too many tests out there, it boils down to is that right or wrong?
Well, it's wrong. I mean, of course it's wrong to rig the tests. But I have to admit, in terms of symbolically watching all those black people, those middle-class black people be handcuffed in droves like that, and that judge going off like that, it was definitely chilling to witness. And I wonder what that's going to do to the thinking of our kids as well, in terms of actually witnessing that. But you're right, when you get down to the bottom line in terms of right and wrong, of course it's wrong to rig tests, but something about it, though, seems severe. And you would have thought they murdered somebody by watching the judge. The judge acted like they had went out and killed all the kids. And I was just wondering what was behind all that intensity, because I used to live in that area, and there's a lot of real bad crimes going on. And I'm wondering why he was so triggered to be acting like that they had done some mad scientist experience on these kids.
But it is,
you know, also keep in mind, 1 second, also keep in mind, 11 were convicted, former teachers and administrators, but 21 others had already pled guilty to lesser charges. So this wasn't just these 12. I mean, it was upwards of 40 folks who were charged.
People who shoplift get a lesser sentence, are convicted for lesser than 20 years. I mean, to me, a fair punishment would be suspend.
Okay, first of all, fact, they have not been sentenced.
Well, okay, but
they've been convicted. They face up to. It's based upon what the prosecutors, but the judge also can have the discretion based upon the law in terms of what the sentencing range could be. So they could get probation, they could get fined, but the law simply states if you're convicted on this conspiracy charge, you face up to 20 years. So I just want to put that out from a fact standpoint.
That's fair to say, but the judge's intensity, as Cleo said, seems to me to be inappropriate. I mean, people do second-degree murder, and maybe not first, but second-degree murder, and are treated less harshly. These folks should not, in my opinion, they were wrong. They were absolutely wrong. They did cheat our kids. There was a young lady on the news last night who said, I graduated from high school and I'm reading at the middle school level. And that's what one of the challenges is. But the other challenge, as you say, is teaching to the test, which forces teachers essentially to be measured by what kind of tests folks pass.
Teachers and administrators here.
And there's multiple choice crap excuse me, but crap is like the SATs and others. They don't measure anything. They just measure your ability to fill out a box. Beverly Hall was a distinguished educator. Now, there are challenges here, but there is no connection from what I can see between the superintendent and these 30-some teachers.
No, I got you, but again, what I'm saying is, but she was one of the folks who was charged. She did not go to trial because she said she was too sick to do so, and she recently died because of breast cancer. I got to get to this next story, and that is, Common was invited to give the commencement speech at Keene University in New Jersey. Well, police officers there in New Jersey protested because Assata Shakur the song was called A Song for Assata, done 15 years ago. She was convicted of killing a police officer and fleeing to Cuba, where she still remains. Keene University released this statement, quote, "The students expressed interest in Common because he composed the Oscar-winning song Glory with our prior commencement speaker, John Legend. While we respect his talent, Keene is pursuing other speaker options." They initially said also that it was premature to announce that he was a speaker. I'm like, okay, you already had the doggone agreement. Right. What do you make of police unions protesting Common speaking for a song 15 years ago?
So for me, up goes the blue wall again. And their way of saying or trying to protect some sort of image as if all police officers are perfect and good and are doing these things. And so even when you read into the case of Assata, excuse me, Shakur, there are so many different discrepancies around that. Right. Even the particular police officers recanting or state trooper recanting some of the things that he said. But ultimately, the students wanted him. And I don't understand why the school decided to just kind of acquiesce and decide not to go with them, other than
they buckled
and maybe had a fear of, you know, how they did in, I think it was Cleveland, when they said we protect, you know, the football team, and so
St. Louis.
So St. Louis, I'm sorry,
with the hands that don't shoot.
Yeah, and saying that we protect you. So I'm sure they put pressure on them about, these are the things that we do for you. Why can't you do this for us?
What I find interesting about it is that Common just got finished saying, and I have to paraphrase because I don't remember the comment literally, but he said something about we should love.
Extend our hand in love.
Extend our love. We should extend our hand in love to white people to basically resolve racism, which was such a wonderful BS, in my opinion, but loving perspective. And in the midst of that, he's still not trusted to speak at a commencement speech. Right. And this thing with Assata, I think it's important that the public knows that this occurred in the 60s and the 70s, when in the midst of the Black Panthers, which Assata was a member of, and the Black Panthers they came into being because of police brutality and black people being murdered left and right, including some sleeping in their own beds. And so it was not a fair context in which Assata was tried and convicted.
You know, beyond that, there is reasonable doubt.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not overwhelming doubt.
Absolutely.
But there is reasonable doubt about the case of Assata.
Okay, here's the deal.
We have the case of Joanne Little, who was so-called, she was shackled, and then theoretically, how does a shackled person shoot a police officer? Right. So there's reasonable doubt, number one. There is a student, there's a former university administrator. The student should have had...
Go beyond her conviction. Here's my whole point. It's a song that he did 15 years ago.
Well, see,
I'm not going to argue the facts of her case.
Right.
He did a song 15 years ago.
It was about her.
No, I understand it was about her. But my point is, he does a song 15 years ago. He just does a song with John Legend, Glory, that wins the Oscar, dealing with Selma. And now all of a sudden, the cops are saying, well, no, you can't speak because a song you did 15 years ago.
And what is the statute of limitations on something like that? We have seen
there is no statute of limitation when it comes to racism, y'all.
We have seen melanin deficient people do all kind of craziness, and 2 years later, let's forgive them. You have, excuse me, Caucasian people biting prostitutes, and 2 years later they show up on television. So I do think you're right, Roland.
Who the hell is that? Who are you talking about?
We'll talk about it later.
Who are you talking about?
Let's bring that all back up.
But you know, there ought to be a statute of limitations. I mean, and there isn't.
But there is no statute of limitation when it comes to racism and bias and the lack of trust of a black male.
And here's the piece here. Although this case happened in New Jersey, Keene University, this is why they are not credible, because how can you stand up as a university and talk about freedom of expression and talk about freedom of speech, and then you could sit here and say, we absolutely disagree with the song.
And talk
but
about
if the students said, that's who we want, And it's their commencement,
Not
not those police officers, not those unions. And if they want to protest, say you have the exact same right to. But King University, y'all wimped out for not allowing Common to speak, and it's as simple as that.
And y'all racist. And you guys are biased, and you should have allowed some
y'all can keep talking, but I'm going to a break right now. Coming up on News One now, R&B star Melanie Fiona and Hyundai's Zafar Brooks joins us to talk about Hope on Wheels program to fight pediatric cancer. Also, Yolanda Adams, Tamala Mann, and Bobby Jones were in the house at this year's Stellar Awards. We'll take you to the red carpet a little later. Plus, we've got a lot of crazy stories in our What the Hell segment. Hit me up with your thoughts on Twitter at News One or at Roland S. Martin, or go to our News One Facebook page. 23 after the hour, News One now on TV One.